and thanks for joining us for France in Focus. This week, we examine how France is responding to what continue to be unprecedented levels of new arrivals of refugees and migrants, many of whom have fled violence and oppression back home. Well, with elections looming and following a visit by the French President François Hollande, the government here is promising to shut down the notorious Calais migrant camp known as the Jungle, many of whose residents had hoped to cross the Channel and start a new life in the UK. But instead, that camp has become a source of major embarrassment to the French and British authorities and a broader symbol of Europe's failure to respond to what is the continent's most serious migrant crisis since the Second World War.
It's the last days of the Jungle. Faced with impending demolition of the camp, some of the migrants here have finally accepted to seek asylum in France. They'll be rehoused in centres dotted around the country.
We're just going to get the bus over there. I've been here in Calais for 3 months. I've decided to take my belongings now because we're fed up of waiting and life here isn't great. I have to leave now, you understand?
Not everyone, though, is ready to pack up and leave what they've built here.
This is the mosque for Sudanese refugees. And these are our rooms back here.
Abdel Basset is from Sudan. He's been living in the jungle for 6 months.
It's not in our interest that they dismantle the jungle without guaranteeing us housing. We will always want to go to England. We'll never stop trying.
Even if the authorities do demolish the camp, many migrants say that changes little about their plans.
If they dismantle the camp, some will certainly come back. I will be back for sure.
Almost 1,300 unaccompanied minors live in the jungle. The vast majority of them say they want to join family members who have reached the UK. Chund is one of them. He's just 14 years old and he's been here for 4 months, having fled Afghanistan.
Every night I try again. But police no chance problem. The jungle finish, later by me go UK.
What happens to the youngest migrants after the jungle is closed is a growing concern for NGOs like Doctors Without Borders.
Some of them will probably want to stay here in northern France to try to reach England. They could live in squats or temporary camps. And of course, that will leave them vulnerable to violence and trafficking networks.
The future for the camp's youngest residents remains uncertain. Some have been rehoused in the United Kingdom, but so far only a handful out of the hundreds of hopefuls have been accepted.
Well, the French government has pledged to relocate the inhabitants of the Calais camp and house them in some 160 different migrant centres across the country. Well, on the whole, the welcome they've been given has been warm, but it hasn't been the case everywhere, especially in smaller communities where local residents have had some tensions with these new arrivals, saying they've got nothing against the migrants themselves, but that they don't want them living in their towns.
200 to 300 French villagers marching with placards and their national flag. They're the inhabitants of Forges-les-Bains, a town of fewer than 4,000 people, an hour's drive from Paris. They're protesting against the settlement of 44 Afghan migrants, all of them men on their own.
We just want the number to be proportional to the size of the village of Forges-les-Bains. And since they're being housed near schools, it would be better to have more of a mix with women and children too.
The village got together and signed a petition, but some took action further. The welcome centre set up for the migrants in an abandoned orphanage was vandalised in protest. A few hundred kilometres away in central France, the 900 inhabitants of Peyre-la-Château are adjusting to having migrants join their community, again all single men.
Our only regret is that we'd love to maybe receive families with children who'll stay a little longer, so the village population will grow.
Initially, however, the villagers did not hide their concern when the men came from the Calais camp 3 months ago.
We didn't like how nobody was told they were coming.
There were fears that there would be thefts, things like that, but it's fine. None of that happened, so no problem.
Shop owners are even seeing benefits to welcoming them.
For the winter, it's good. It means there are more customers. Almost every day they come to buy bread, 10 baguettes, so it's fine.
Many mayors have struggled to reassure their townsfolk, however, and have had to make promises to watch the new arrivals at all times. Charity workers help the migrants integrate quickly, particularly with learning French.
They have a real thirst for learning that's terrific. They are always on time. They have a real desire.
Learning the language that will enable them to apply for asylum in France, when just a few months ago all they dreamed of was making it to England.
Well, it's not just in small towns and villages that reception centres are opening their doors, but also in big cities, and the French capital is no exception. Well, the charity EMMAOS Solidarite is behind one such reception centre here in Paris, and we're joined now by the man in charge, Bruno Morel. Very nice to speak to you, Bruno. Just tell us, what facilities are you offering to migrants and refugees here in Paris?
The project, which opens soon, is ambitious, as it's the first time we've done it in France. The center will welcome migrants as soon as they arrive in Paris. Previously, they were left in camps or on the street until housing solutions would open up. What's different is that we will evaluate and provide them with information about what will happen next, their rights, and what they can expect for their future as migrants. And after that, we will then find them somewhere to stay. These people have often experienced something traumatic. They need to be able to rest. So we tell them we will listen to them, evaluate their situation when they arrive. We also need to provide them with access to medical services for their mental and physical health because of the difficult experiences they may have had. We will accompany them for 10 days. They'll be under a roof, somewhere warm. We'll look at their situation and what they want, and we'll guide them towards a structure. For the past 18 months, there have been a lot of camps. Lots of things have been done, but it has largely been concentrated in Paris. What's new is that we will try and find solutions throughout France.
Do you think we're going to see more and more of these reception centres here in France? Because presumably there's huge demand.
It's true that there are a lot of arrivals, but it is France's tradition. It's in our history to welcome them. There have been previous waves of migrants, and we welcomed them with dignity in the past. Look at the number of asylum seekers here in France. There must be around 100,000 per year, but in Germany it's 10 times more. In Paris we see roughly 50 to 100 people arrive every day. So it's up to us to create structures for them. I cannot abide. EMMAOS cannot stand by and leave these people in the streets, and we cannot remain indifferent.
And what is your opinion of how the migrant crisis has been handled, not just by the French government, but by Europe as a whole?
As I said, we have a history, a tradition of welcoming people. These people are living in exile. They've lived through war, traumatic experiences. Look at what happens in the Mediterranean Sea, more than 3,000 deaths per year. So for me, we should welcome these people with open arms. And from a European perspective, I remind you that there is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Article 13, which advocates the right to the freedom of movement. So we should really think about how this article is being applied today.
It's become an increasingly common sight these past few years in Paris, people begging on the side of the road with signboards on which they claim to be Syrian refugees. Well, in many cases, that claim is genuine, but as we're about to see in this next report, there are also people out there taking advantage of this human tragedy.
It's the same story every time. Around the edges of the French capital, women in headscarves with placards, all variations on a theme, Syrian family SOS. However, watch what happens when they're spoken to in Arabic.
You're Syrian, are you?
Yes.
Where from?
Aleppo.
So far, so good. But when the questions get harder, they don't understand and answer in French.
Where are you from?
Romania.
Romania? Do you speak Arabic?
It turns out they've learned just a handful of basic Arabic words. Elsewhere, the same thing happens.
You're Syrian and you don't speak Arabic.
They play on people's sympathy to earn a little extra cash, and it's not long before someone comes to collect the money. It's a cynical ploy, well known to French police.
These are the same people who a year ago were pretending to suffer from permanent disabilities, and now they're Syrian.
When it comes to Syrian refugees, France grants an official status to 95% of their asylum demands. They're given lodging and an allowance, just like Anas Al-Ayoubi, who arrived a year and a half ago. He's disgusted with the blackening of Syria's name.
But if someone give it to this lady money, this is good. And that people who said we are Syrian, we need money, that people, it's liar.
It's not always so simple. Seen here on candid camera, two actual Syrian women are pleading for help in central Paris. They're speaking Arabic, passports in hand. Cooped up 5 to a room in their hotel, they said they'd been registered for asylum in Spain, but had to cancel it if they wanted to move elsewhere. In the EU, refugees can only make one request for asylum, meaning this family could be sent back to Spain. For now, they'll stay in France for the winter before trying to head for Belgium.
Well, that's it for this week's edition of France in Focus. Thanks for watching. See you again soon here on France 24.